Good afternoon. Thanks very much to our esteemed panelists, and thank you all for joining us today for a live conversation and a timely one at that, as September marks both Healthy Aging and Life Insurance Awareness Month. Today, you'll hear from leaders focused on improving and influencing changes to help redesign and rethink our golden years and tackle this idea of living better longer. It is a rare treat to bring together a psychiatrist, an actuary, and a researcher all in one panel. And we are thrilled to bring these experts together to talk about this important concept of longevity and health span and its implications. Now, longevity has been a buzzword, especially in the wellness space. And as life expectancy rises, the challenge isn't just adding years to our lives, it's adding life to our years. By way of introduction, I'm Jessica Ruggles, and I lead financial wellness thought leadership at New York Life. Today, I am joined by forward-looking experts across health, wealth, and caregiving. Dr. Divya Hedgren, Medical Director of New York Life Group Benefit Solutions. Todd Taylor, Senior Vice President and Head of New York Life Direct, New York Life's direct-to-consumer life insurance business. Dr. Lori Frank, Senior Research Fellow with the National Alliance for Caregiving. Welcome. On your right-hand side of your screen, please note that you can read full speaker bios along with following today's panelists on LinkedIn. A few housekeeping items before we begin, just to make the most of your time with us today. Today's webinar is being recorded. A replay will be sent to you after today's session concludes. The recording will also be available on our website, and the link is included in the related content section of your meeting console. Now, during registration, we asked you to submit questions that you have for our panelists. If you weren't able to submit a question, or if you think of something during today's conversation, please feel free to submit in the Ask Questions section of your meeting console. We will try to answer as many questions as we can during our time together today. After the webinar, a short survey will appear on your screen. We would love your feedback, especially suggestions for future topics. With that, let's dive in. Our panel is exploring golden living, health, aging, and financial security to think about what it means to age and live well across the intersecting domains of health, wealth, and care. The goal of the panel is to discuss what is our responsibility to proactively consider as we try closing the health span lifespan gap, how to think about the impact of cognitive health, how longevity, its challenges and opportunities can impact our golden years, and sharing relevant research to support all of these considerations. So to ground us in our conversation today, how do you define the concept of golden living? Divya, would love to start with you, and then Todd, Lori, welcome your build.
Thank you, Jessica. I'm so happy to be here today. For me, golden living means being true to my core values. It's about living with purpose and joy, taking good care of my health and well-being, and staying connected to my community.
Awesome. Good afternoon, everybody, at least for those of us in the East, and morning for everyone else. So golden living to me is realized when you have the confidence to live the life in retirement that you want, that you choose. Nothing's ever totally worry-free, of course, but being prepared for things that could go wrong gives you confidence and enables the greatest likelihood of living those years happily. I'm going to come into today's discussion from a financial lens, although I'm thrilled that my co-presenters here will come at it from the topics of health and caregiving, because one, those are critically important topics for retirement planning. But interestingly, even from a financial lens, we'll discuss how those emotional aspects of retirement planning actually can impact the financial side as well and increase that confidence that we've talked about.
Wonderful. And I'll just add in that as the New York Life Position paper states it, it's health and wealth and care in our later years. So to me, that means health span that matches our lifespan.
Thank you so much. Healthspan that matches lifespan, thinking about confidence, and also how it all connects back to our purpose. That's really how we can think about living now to help how we age really well. And that leads us to our second discussion topic, which is talking about the rising interest around planning for these longer lives. And given each of your unique perspectives, do you see a connection to or relationship between longevity and your focus area? And what do you see as the opportunities or challenges? Todd, would love to start with you, and then Lori Divya would welcome your bill.
Great. So yeah, I'm going to address longevity from a financial side, but I will say, while it's a complicating factor and a risk item for financial planning, I should add, in virtually every other aspect, it is a blessing. So I just want to have that caveat up front before I go into this. I'll start by saying there's a variety of reasons why spending down assets, or what I'll refer to several times as decumulation planning, the planning once you've retired and you begin to spend down assets or live off of other sources of income, is materially more complex than accumulation or saving for retirement. Both periods face investment risk. So stocks, bonds, et cetera, they have volatility, they can lose money, et cetera. That's true whether you're saving for retirement or in retirement. But there are a number of other risks that are more impactful or unique to retirement. I'll name a couple of these. First, sequence risk. So average returns, obviously returns matter in both periods before and after retirement, but the order of the returns is uniquely important in retirement. Even if you average, for instance, 7% returns during retirement, you'll get a much different outcome in terms of how much you can spend and how much you'll end up with at sort of the end, depending on whether you have gains followed by losses or losses followed by gains. Again, a unique risk to retirement. Similarly, inflation obviously impacts all of us in our working lives and in retirement. But in general, while you're working, you've got a little bit of a hedge in the form of labor income. Now, we can argue about whether labor income keeps up with inflation in this day and age, but in general, you've got a hedge that doesn't exist in retirement. So it becomes a more impactful risk in retirement. And then finally, longevity. So in general, those of us have an idea of how long we intend to work. Now, of course, there's some variation in that. You may not exactly retire when you intend, but you have a pretty good idea of the planning horizon. I'm an actuary, as Jessica called me out for, but I have no idea how long any individual is going to live. We talk in population averages. In fact, I'm going to argue most people don't know how long they're going to live. So in retirement, you've got this extra variable. This longevity produces an unknown time horizon, an unknown amount of spending that you're going to have in your lifetime. In addition to that, it also compounds other risks. And a great example of this is our research shows that in terms of lifetime healthcare expenses, most of the variability in healthcare expenses can be explained by how long you live. Not just how many years you've got, but even annual expenses increase significantly the longer you live. So the point of all this is to say, it's not insignificant to save for retirement. There's a lot of saving involved and how you're going to invest your money, et cetera. But the problem becomes much more complex in retirement. And to put a bow on this, a Nobel Prize winner in economics, William Sharpe, a few years ago was quoted as saying, retirement or decumulation planning is, quote, the nastiest, most complicated problem in finance. So, of course, that begs the question, if a Nobel laureate in economics can't figure out how to design a retirement plan, what are the rest of us supposed to? And the implication of that, which I'll get into later in our discussion, is that it does have impacts on how people actually behave in retirement in the face of all that.
Thank you. When we think about this, Lori, given your research area and thinking about longevity, how do you feel as though longevity, the challenges and opportunities can relate to caregiving?
Yeah, most definitely. So as Todd said, longevity brings the gift of time. That's a good thing, absolutely. But realistically, from my perspective, it does bring along some challenges for ourselves individually, for our loved ones, and actually for both. So I think about this from the standpoint of family caregiving, which encapsulates this reality of increased longevity, the gift of it. And among our opportunities now are to raise our own awareness, and that can help with planning about the real caregiving issues that many of us are going to be facing. And I'll add that at the National Alliance for Caregiving, we take an active stance in terms of addressing those policies and advocating policies at a global level that can help caregivers. But there's some interesting information for us to think through at an individual level. So we just released our Caregiving in the U.S. survey. That's a survey that the National Alliance for Caregiving and AARP puts out just once every 5 years. And this was one of the years. And you can find it at caregivingintheus.org. But longevity connects to the survey results in several specific ways. So, first, I personally found it interesting from the survey that more than half of family caregivers now are not caregivers by choice. So, the majority of us are finding ourselves in caregiving situations without that necessarily being something that we chose for ourselves. I'll also add that the survey's clear caregiving is long term for many, which links to longevity in our longer lives. So, nearly 30% of family caregivers have been providing care for 5 or more years, and 15% for 10 or more years. So, that's a long time in caregiving. And I'll note these numbers are up relative to 2015 and 2020 as well. Increasing longevity is behind part of that increase. And second, caregiving is time consuming, not just in terms of years, but in terms of the days of our lives. So more and more caregivers are spending more than 40 hours a week in caregiving tasks. So that's a long time as well. I want to add in terms of longevity that many people think about aging in place as the most financially responsible way to go. And that's not necessarily the case based on what we're seeing in the survey data. So um, most care recipients actually live at home or in someone else's home. They're aging in place. But family caregivers are experiencing a lot of negative financial impacts, depleting life savings, taking on debt. And there's right now among working age family caregivers, 70% of us are also working while caregiving. But even so, we're being affected negatively financially because of these caregiving duties. So, um, leaving bills unpaid is commonly reported, and using up long term care savings as well as short term care savings, moving to less expensive homes. One in five can't afford basic expenses. So, really, some striking results that are the financial impacts of this longevity and of the caregiving. So, longevity is a good thing, but we're definitely seeing an increase in caregiving careers in terms of the total numbers of people caregiving, but in terms of the time that we're spending with our caregiving. And then the last thing I'll add is that caregiver friendly workplace benefits are now more common than they've been in the past, but even so, they're not keeping pace with this growing need.
Thank you so much. And I think what's so interesting is you bring up the duration of caregiving and how this impacts households for a longer time that they may have anticipated. Do we think that instead of saying and recalling the sandwich generation, do you think we're suddenly going to have a club sandwich generation or panini generation where it's really messy? What food type do you think will start to define this multi-generational care?
Right. Excellent point about multi-generational care. So first, I'll say that nearly a third of family caregivers, according to this last survey, are actually in that sandwich generation, meaning that they have children living at home, those under age 18, while also caring for someone beyond just their child raising responsibilities. That's a lot of people. That's probably about 16 million of us in that situation. But as you point out, more is being learned about club sandwich, multi generation caregiving, which goes along with this idea of increased longevity, increased lifespan. So, caregiving is in the future for many, not just for our parents, but it might involve caring for grandparents and grandparents caring for children. And then children in a caregiving household might also be part of these family caregivers. They're care partners as well. It's about 4 million children actually under the age of 18 who are assisting with that caregiving. So a lot of us are in this club sandwich.
Thank you for that. Divya, what do you think about from a health perspective? What are the opportunities and challenges as it relates to longevity from your perspective?
Yes. So kind of to get on the same page, I always like to clarify with definition. So even though this isn't a position paper, I do believe we often define longevity as the number of years that we live, which is what we call our lifespan. And from a geriatric psychiatry perspective, I really like to focus on the quality and the meaning of those years, which is what we call our health span. So professionally, I've had the honor of treating many older adults from their 80s up until their early 100s. And many of these individuals really taught me what positive aging is all about. And what stood out to me most about those who aged well was their optimism. And that was usually tied to their strong sense of connection. So I saw in these individuals a strong sense of connection to oneself. So that would be their sense of purpose, their sense of meaning. They also embraced aging, where they saw the next stages in their lives as opportunities for growth, self-reflection, and self-discovery. Another aspect to their sense of connection was related to their connectedness with people. So they had a strong sense of belonging through their relationships with their family, friends, and their community overall. I also really liked to talk with them about their connection with their environment. So whether it was indoors in their home or outdoors through nature, they really described a sense of comfort and energy in their surroundings. So really, this idea of connection can be somewhat of a challenge for us as we're getting older. So while we are really fairly open to having discussions about planning for our financial future, we may not always be thinking about how we're going to stay connected to our meaning, our purpose, and our community overall. And this is really, the importance of connection is not just in my clinical work, it's also supported by key research. There was a research study done through Harvard called the Harvard Study of Adult Development. And it's the longest study in the world related to human relationships. It spans over 80 years. And what it concluded was that the strongest predictor of a long, healthy, and happy life was the quality of our relationships. It wasn't wealth or other socioeconomic status factors, it was relationships and people. And in addition, people might already be aware of the outgoing U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. Murthy. He had declared loneliness as a public health epidemic. And that was partly related to striking data that showed loneliness can actually increase risk for many mental and physical health problems. So there's a real opportunity here to take action and to self-reflect and open up the conversations about how we can think about the psychological and social well-being aspects of longevity and getting older. So from my perspective, I'm a psychiatrist. So I'm always asking questions about how can we get to know ourselves better? How can we self-reflect? And so some of the questions that come to mind as we're talking about longevity and opportunities to really tackle social well-being as we're getting older are what is my purpose right now? What are activities that bring me joy? What do I like to do? Who are the people I want to stay close to as I get older? And how can I nurture those relationships? And also, there might be times when people are feeling isolated and lonely. And when that happens, who can I turn to when I'm feeling that way? We also talked a little bit about environments, which I think is really important as we're aging. So how can I stay connected to in my environment? What are the kinds of spaces that bring me joy and comfort? So, just to emphasize again, the data shows it, our experiences also show it, that maintaining that sense of connection personally to our own sense of purpose, our meaning, and to others in our community is really foundational. And I believe it's critical to healthy aging. And it's something that we all together as a community really should uh, pay better attention to.
Thank you. And I think all three of you have really hit the nail on the head here. It's a wonderful opportunity for us to live these longer lives thanks to advancements in technology and medicine and sanitation. At the same time, this duration of these longer lives come with it these prolonged market exposure and risks that we need to consider. It comes with this longer duration of caregiving, and it comes with us questions that we should ask ourselves and our loved ones as we think and plan more proactively. But also, we have these open dialogues early and often so that we can recognize how we want this next year, these next decades to look like. I think talking about the way in which we have these conversations around longer durations, we also would be remiss if we didn't talk about family caregiving, as we know this has become a central part of life for millions. The National Alliance for Caregiving has found 63 million Americans are family caregivers, which has grown 45% since 2015. Now, family caregivers are a vital part of our long-term care system, but it, of course, comes at a cost. So, given the likelihood of providing care and one of the major drivers of needing that care, especially in older adults, being cognitive decline, what are some of the practical challenges families face in planning ahead? Lori would welcome you to start, and then Divya, Todd would welcome your builds here.
Certainly. Thank you. So, what's top of mind for me relates to awareness. So, not everyone is aware of the potential for long duration caregiving. And relatedly, not everyone is aware that they may already be family caregivers. So, I give the example of my husband who spends many hours a week helping out his mother, my mother in law, with medical appointments, with different aspects of coordinating her health care, and some other activities. And he wouldn't necessarily self identify as a family caregiver. And yet he is, as I have told him. And that's part of why I'm so proud of the Caregiving in the US survey, because the way the questions were asked was very thoughtfully and very carefully, so that this survey was able to identify individuals whether they had passed that bar of self identification or not. So for me, awareness is top of mind. And that also relates to the point you raised about cognitive impairment. So not everyone is aware that their family members might actually be in early stages of cognitive impairment. And yet they are starting to be caregivers to their family members, for example, starting on a journey, and might not be aware or thinking ahead to the progressive nature and that the caregiving career might actually continue. So um, this relates to the societal invisibility of caregiving altogether. Historically, we just don't talk about it a lot in popular culture, and in policy, et cetera. So along with that, people tend to avoid talking about cognitive impairment when they do see changes in themselves or in others. And that relates to perpetuating that invisibility of the reliance on others and that caregiving that is actually going along with that cognitive impairment. Um, Obviously, as we're leading longer lives, more and more of us are likely to be affected by different forms of cognitive impairment and dementia. Estimates now are that about 1 in 9 individuals over the age of 65 have dementia. And as the number of older adults grows, that number is expected to grow as well. And we found in the survey that memory issues or dementia among care recipients are reported for about third of the family caregivers as the main reason, the primary reason for providing care, and even more than as a secondary reason. So cognitive impairment is out there. It's pretty evident among family caregivers that we surveyed. And like I said, as people live longer, that cognitive impairment and the awareness of it is really key to ensuring that you're planning ahead for what might be a relatively long caregiving career.
Divya, from a clinical perspective, what are your thoughts here? Oh, I think you might be on mute.
Hi there. Thank you. I was just thinking a little bit more about what Lori had mentioned. Caregivers often find themselves in this unexpected position of being a caregiver, and perhaps they're not fully aware of maybe the duration or the extent of the duties. Um, Overall, when I think of family caregivers, I think they are truly extraordinary people. Some of the most empathic, conscientious, and reliable individuals. And while caregiving can be extremely rewarding, it's also one of the most challenging balancing acts that we can have, because it usually is a job that's on top of all of our other responsibilities and our other jobs that we have in our life. And this was something, a common clinical scenario that I would see in my office would be a caregiver of a loved one who has a dementia diagnosis would come in, and the caregiver was often feeling very worried and fearful and sometimes fatigued. And they would describe a situation where their loved one with dementia was at risk for what we call sundowning. These are episodes of disorientation that occur more towards the evening or nighttime. So the caregiver, out of love and vigilance, would stay up, with their loved one to make sure their loved one didn't have a fall or a wandering episode and get hurt. And then during the day, the caregiver was also on duty. And this is especially the case if there's not a solid support network in place helping with the caregiving needs of the loved one. And over time, the caregiver can experience fatigue, stress, exhaustion, and this burnout can really also put them at risk for a variety of mental and physical health problems. And the research really shows that caregivers have a higher risk for health difficulties and problems versus non-caregivers.
And
Oh,
sorry.
yes.
I just want to add that you're absolutely right. There's physical strain, emotional strain. Nearly half of caregivers in the survey reported high levels of emotional strain. It's really taking a toll.
Absolutely. And that the emotional strain can present itself as, fatigue, but it's also sadness, sometimes depression or feelings of hopelessness or even apathy. And these are all very serious concerns that we need to address and take note of. So I really see, the challenges that families face is that these conversations, crucial conversations around family caregiving needs are overlooked. So while we all tend to avoid the hard conversation, me, myself included, but sometimes when we avoid these tough conversations, it can put us at risk for a caregiving crisis. And that can be even more emotionally distressing and possibly financially more put us into a situation that's more costly. So by having a discussion earlier on about caregiving needs for the family, we can make effective decisions in a calm setting and really, take that proactive approach and be prepared for obstacles that come up. And when they do come up, we can handle them with ease, and we can handle them together. So kind of, what reminds me to talk about these conversations when patients would come in to see me would be, we often ask about healthcare power of attorney and whether you have your living will in place. So these are really important legal documents to get done and I encourage you to get these done if you don't already have them done. And this is also a good reminder during these times is to really consider, do I need to start thinking about caregiving needs, whether it's for myself or for a loved one? And again, I'm a psychiatrist, so I like to ask lots of questions. And so I kind of will pose a few questions to sort of get the conversation started for you and your family. So some of the questions I would ask would be, okay, well, who is on your caregiving team? And when caregiving is needed, how are we going to work together and share these responsibilities? Are we going to be able to handle this on our own, or will we have to outreach to community resources? And if one of us is really fatigued or burning out or having our own mental or physical health issues, how are other team members going to help out and support that individual? So from my perspective as a psychiatrist, I call this care resilience. So it's taking that proactive approach and having honest and open conversations about caregiving, about sharing these responsibilities and supporting the caregiver's health and well-being in the long run.
Wonderful. But
And
I can build on that, although I'll share I'm by no means an expert on caregiving, but I do want to hit on a couple of those themes you guys mentioned: preparedness, speaking, openly and honestly with family members and with professionals. But in particular, I want to highlight the sort of emotional side of investing. I mentioned earlier, retirement planning is complex, more so than when you're saving for retirement. And what's interesting is this has really interesting implications for how people behave in retirement. And one very specific one I'll talk about is the behavior of many folks to actually conservatively spend less than they could. Now, this sounds very counterintuitive. There's well-documented evidence that many Americans have troubles saving for retirement, saving enough, putting away money so that you have enough for retirement. And that's absolutely true. And I don't want at all downplay how important that is. But once folks get to retirement, all of this complexity, caregiving considerations, this worry about the future, the unique retirement risks, research shows many people are systematically underspending what they could. And I'll give an example of this. So 15 years or so ago, I was earlier in my career steeped in retirement income planning strategies. So trying to figure out what all these optimal kind of mathematical answers were. And I happened to have a sort of real life focus group. I was visiting my 90-year-old grandmother, and I asked her, "What is your retirement strategy?" Now she looked at me very inquisitively, like, what was I after? Like, where was I going with this? But then she just responded to me with what was, in retrospect, profound. She simply said, "I don't spend more than I take in." Now, this shocked me because I was learning about all these retirement strategies, bucketing, systematic withdrawals, flooring, all this stuff. And I was like, I've never heard of this idea. But it actually works, of course. If you never spend $1 more than you bring in, you won't run out of money in retirement. That actually works very effectively. And the data shows that my grandmother is not unique on this. We have a whole financial planning sort of industry that is predicated on the idea that people save for retirement and then they systematically spend down in retirement. And the data shows very few people actually do that. Roughly a third of people, according to most surveys, actually systematically spend down. More people, like my grandmother, effectively figure out how much money is coming in and then just figure out how to match their savings to that or match their spending to that. Now, again, that's not a bad thing in an absolute sense. You won't run out of money doing that. The problem with it is it's completely at odds with what people say they want to do. Most people, when you survey retirees, what are you trying to accomplish? The number one item almost every time is something along the lines of comfortable standard of living in retirement, which is highly correlated with how much you're able to spend. And just about the last item on virtually every survey is leaving something to my heirs. In fact, some people, if you ask them, they're like, I don't want my kids to have anything. I want them to have zero. But And the point is, if you systematically save as my grandmother did and don't spend down your principal, you will have the latter. You will have lived less comfortably in retirement, and you will have ended up with money to pass on to your heirs. So that sort of disconnect between behavior and stated interests, in my view, is in reaction to all that worry about the future, caregiving concerns, these unique risks, and it's a form of conservatism. Again, if Nobel laureates can't figure out how to do this, the simple thing to do is be conservative. And what I'll offer on this front is that there are solutions to overcome this. One of them is to evaluate what is worrying you, long-term care costs, that longevity component, having to take care of a sick relative, and look at financial solutions that can help reduce that risk. The magic of this is that it isn't a zero-sum bet with, for instance, an insurance company. The data shows, and there's been a number of interesting research pieces written on this by Vanguard, Ebury, and others, that by offering someone or having someone have higher amounts of, for instance, guaranteed income in retirement, or long-term care insurance, or some kind of a coverage that provides for final expenses at the end of life, people spend more holding their income and their wealth constant. So if you have these other protections, it's this peace of mind fact that actually gives you the confidence, to go back to what I said earlier, to spend more. So I think the conclusion, to tie it back to what Divya and Lori shared, is that there's a lot of things that can go wrong in the course of your retirement. There's a lot of worries, many of them emotional, not financial, but those emotional factors impact how people behave. And so my message from a financial standpoint is be open about those, have conversations about those, but also look for ways to be able to reduce them so that you don't actually act at odds with what you want to. So that's how to tie the topics together, I hope.
Absolutely. Thank you. All three of you really brought this together in a beautiful way of understanding this need, the persistent consideration, and also how to constantly come back to, where can we go? How can we have these conversations proactively with our loved ones? How can we also have these conversations proactively with our financial professionals, considering financial professionals or medical practitioners or care supporters? These are all part of our team. We are building our team, and having these conversations early and often allow us to think through our unique financial strategy, the market risks, the unintended healthcare risks, but also the risk of not having that joy, Divya, that came back to your point of being able to have these golden years filled with joy and with purpose. Which brings us to our final topic discussion today. You have all shared incredible insights and research, and there is plenty of opportunity for impact here. Before we pivot to Q&A, I'd like to ask you all, what is one thing that you would like to share with our audience coming out of our conversation today? Divya, we'd love to start with you, and then Lori, Todd would welcome your build.
Sure. So one message I'd like to share with you all is staying connected to your meaning, your purpose, and your community. And doing all of these things can really help to benefit your health in the present moment and also in the future. And also, like you mentioned, this is all about building our team. So staying connected to your healthcare team is vital in staying healthy and aging well. So whether it's your primary care physician, a physical therapist, a registered dietitian, seeking out that expertise and staying connected with them, and knowing that this social connection along the way with your team is going to help you to stay sharp and stay strong and happy.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And I'll add that it's an awareness that I would like people to focus on, that we've said that many caregivers are not caregivers by choice. So let's think about that now. What does that mean for the decisions we have to make, for the conversations that we need to have? But also not just at this individual level, but at a broader societal level. What does that mean in terms of policies that are out there for us as caregivers in our workplace or generally, and how can we make a positive impact on those? That awareness piece is also recognizing some of the downsides, as we've discussed, the stress and the strain, the loneliness, but sense of purpose came through actually from our survey participants as well. So um, being aware that there's upside and downside. For us, the survey provides a powerful mirror for all of us, what's happening nationally and how we can use that information to plan for our own individual futures and those of our loved ones. So it's that power to think ahead through awareness.
Yeah, I would build on this and frankly go to what you said, Jessica. My single piece of advice is to, or thing I would highlight is to talk to professionals, financial professionals, your family, be open and transparent about some of these kind of risks and concerns that I've mentioned and that Loria and Divya have highlighted far more eloquently. I can give people a very mathematical answer on like what's a optimal retirement plan, but the complexity and my grandmother's example shows that most people won't act on that if they're not confident in with all these various risks that are out there. So I think a better solution is to be speaking to professionals who do this, but be transparent about that. Like, don't pretend like you are going to behave like every other person, that person has worked with. Be transparent about what you're worried about and work with the professional to help solve for some of those risks and needs. And again, speak with your family about it as well.
Thank you all so much. We appreciate you sharing your insights and also coming back to this point of how to have these conversations proactively. That's what Golden Living is all about. We want to get to these golden years to live with purpose, to live with joy, to live financially secure. And we do that by living well today and asking those questions. Divya, I love when you talk about being a psychiatrist. You're always curious. You're always asking questions. We could borrow that from you of just being more curious, asking those questions, and going to the right professionals for that type of help. Now we're going to pivot over to Q&A. We asked you all to submit questions during registration. Now, if you didn't get a chance to submit questions during registration, please feel free to submit a question in the Ask Question section of your meeting console. The first question that we got, Todd, this one will be for you. What is the biggest myth or misconception that people have about their retirement years?
Yeah, I mean, this ties very closely, I think, with what I shared earlier. We've done research and called this the decumulation paradox. Now, that sounds wordy, but again, it's this idea that we have an entire financial planning sort of industry predicated on the idea people spend down assets in retirement. We've often learned that behavioral economics trumps regular economics, and this is a classic example of it. People don't actually do that because they're not all economists. They don't all have this all figured out. And so again, I encourage folks to speak to financial professionals who do this for a living, but the key is to talk about these risks, talk about what concerns you. The optimal plan for one person is different than the optimal plan for another, not just because of how the assets are invested, but because of the caregiving considerations and how a person will respond to different kinds of risks and what they're worried about. And so I encourage people build a plan, but make that plan factor in these emotional, health-related, caregiving-related topics, as that'll get to the way that you'll actually behave in retirement. So I think that's probably the biggest misconception that, there's sort of a solution.
Absolutely. I think that's a good reminder, not only for us individuals, but also for our advisor community of knowing that this isn't just a singular focus when we talk about retirement. It's so much bigger than that. And it includes all these other factors, including health considerations and care considerations. So asking those questions and prompting clients to talk about that is really helpful. We got a couple of questions about blue zones. I think that blue zones are popular and they're connected when we're talking about longevity. So Divya, would love to know from you, blue zones, as they're rising in popularity when we talk about longevity trend, what do you think we can learn from blue zones or incorporate into our lives, considering your lifestyle medicine perspective here?
Great question, Jessica. And I know, yes, Blue Zones is so popular right now, especially after the Netflix documentary aired. So for those who may not be familiar with the Blue Zones concept, these are regions in the world that have been identified by National Geographic explorers and researchers where people live the longest. And they don't just live, they thrive. They live healthy and happy lives, and they're quite active. So the initial research study actually focused on discovering areas with the highest concentration of centenarians. Centenarians are individuals who live up until the age of 100 or greater. So what's fascinating about these areas is that many of them don't have automation or in modern conveniences like we do, but they can still live a healthy life. And much of it is based on their daily lifestyle habits, which really overlaps with the concepts and the pillars of health that are identified through lifestyle medicine practices. So, some of the things that we can learn, one thing that stands out to me is that many of the individuals, they just move naturally throughout the day. They are not going to the gym or doing workout videos at home like me, or, they're not trying to be an elite athlete or to have a certain physique or be a supermodel. They're just living their lives every single day. So they're walking. Some of these areas have natural inclines and hills. So they're walking up hills every day. In some places, they're sitting on the floor and then standing up many times throughout the day. And then they're just doing their everyday chores inside the house and outdoors, maybe gardening. So these small, consistent movements over time really help to establish and maintain muscle mass and physical strength, along with joint stability, balance, and flexibility, so that, years to come, you are able to still maintain your physical mobility and independence. Another thing that stands out in the Blue Zones regions that overlaps with lifestyle medicine principles is the food. The food that they eat is really whole foods, plant predominant, very nourishing. They probably eat meat just a few times a month. And it's the type of food that they eat, what they eat, but it's also how they eat it. They eat it together in a community. They eat, taking their time with gratitude, mindfully. It's really an opportunity for that physical nourishment through the food, but also nourishing their souls through that social connection. So again, we're coming back to social connection again. So again, these communities have such a strong sense of belonging, and their culture, their community really helps to shape healthy living. So what I see here is just sort of this overarching principle in Blue Zones where they're not trying to be healthy. Their culture, their community, their environment really helps to shape these healthy behaviors so that the healthy choice is the easy and natural choice.
Those are good tips just for all of us as we're trying to be more mindful, healthier, more connected. And I will say from the workplace well-being research, this belonging is so important. The sense of belonging in our communities and with our families, but also a sense of belonging with our work. And that shows how that connects to higher likelihood of retention and recruitment. So thanks for bringing up those factors. This next question, we got a bunch of questions about the difference between men and women as it relates to cognitive health. Now, as we know, on average, women in the U.S. live about 5 years longer than men, and oftentimes this is referred to as this longevity gap. Has research shown, Lori, if there is any significant risk of dementia that women face at higher rates, or do women face or experience faster cognitive decline than men?
Yeah, all great questions. So, in fact, women are about twice as likely as men to develop Alzheimer's disease. And roughly 2/3 of all people with Alzheimer's are women. The longer life expectancy that you point to, though, while part of it doesn't really explain the difference that we're seeing. And so that this is still something under active investigation, what could lead to these sex differences. So more and more research is showing that there are differences between men and women in the rates at which they get it, but also in the disease course. And some of the research that's been most fascinating lately is about the role of earlier life and midlife in later life cognition. So, hormonal contributions are a big part of that. Increasingly, we're beginning now to understand, as more and more research on sex differences is funded, that in addition to the lifestyle factors, which are hugely important, there really are some biological factors that if we understood better, we could intervene earlier. But also for those of us in later life, there's some interventions that this research does suggest, especially for women in perimenopause or menopause and later.
And I'd like to just add a little bit to that, Lori, from a clinical standpoint. Those periods of time for women, the perimenopausal, menopausal, and postmenopausal are critical times to intervene. Like you mentioned, there are hormonal changes that occur, which can lead to metabolic changes in the body as well as metabolic changes in the brain. So, really taking advantage of lifestyle interventions through good food and fitness, sleep, stress reduction for women during these times is extremely important to reduce and mitigate the risk for cognitive decline.
Wow. Thank you both for sharing and for also reiterating the powerful mind body connection. And I think that's so important as we consider how to live and age well. When we think about these longer durations, but we also think about the complexity. Todd, you brought up how challenging it is to think about this, but we received a question for you. How might people better think about balancing managing risk with building savings? Is there ever a rule of thumb in your experience, like 40-60? What have you seen here?
Yeah, I think I go back to what I shared earlier that make it so that unfortunately there isn't a simple kind of rule of thumb. So when you're saving for retirement, there's this take 100 and subtract your age, and that's how much you should hold in stocks or equities. And I'm not advocating or, pro or against that position, but it's a common, sort of piece of investing advice. The trick in retirement is that the rate at which you would spend down impacts materially sort of like what the optimal strategy is. And I'll give an example of this. If you follow that 100 minus your age and you're 70 years old, you put 30% of your money in equities and the rest in bonds. If you spend down at 5 or 6%, you think of that as a conservative investment strategy. It's actually incredibly aggressive because you've got no asset that is going to return enough to make up for that spending. And similarly, if you were spending down at 1%, it probably doesn't really make a huge amount of difference what your asset allocation is because you'll be fine in most of those scenarios. So the point is, there's a lot of uniqueness. This is why it's important to talk to a professional to talk through these different characteristics, because your withdrawal rate, how long your lifespan, is your best guess at your lifespan, these various other considerations on risk all matter. I'll also add, there were a couple of very good questions in here in the Q&A. One of them was on sequence risk. And I think the caveat to what I just said is, it is absolutely true that sequence risk is most impactful in the 5 years before or the 5 years after you actually stop working. And so there you want to have income sources that are not correlated with the stock market. So you can still hold equities, and certainly you probably should for later in life, but you want to make sure that what you're actually spending early in retirement is coming from sources of income that don't move with the stock market, fixed income sources, Social Security, et cetera. So that's one piece of advice. Just make sure you're not doing that, but that isn't an asset allocation. That isn't the full strategy. Again, the full strategy has more to do with how you're spending down your assets overall and a variety of other factors.
Makes good sense. And thank you for taking off two questions at once. We appreciate that. The next question is more about the science behind cognitive changes. Divya, would welcome your response here. How do you think about and understand the science behind cognitive changes as we age? And what are some lifestyle interventions as they relate to those cognitive changes?
Yes, this is a great question. So cognition is a really broad term. It can encompass, in general, just how our brain thinks and processes information. So it's not just related to memory, but also attention focus, language, speech, um, and ability to calculate it and problem solve. So just putting that out there so we have an idea of what cognition means. So some factors that affect cognitive change. One is normal aging. So as we're getting older, there will be some changes with our thinking process. They tend to be mild and should not affect our day-to-day functioning. Now, on the other hand, more concerning factors that can contribute to cognitive decline would be various disease processes, which are typically in the category of what we call neurodegenerative disorders. And that's an umbrella term. There are several different pathways that contribute to that. A couple of the most common pathways would be a major vascular event, like a stroke, which would show up as a stepwise decline in your cognition. And another common disease process we're all familiar with is Alzheimer's disease, which is characterized by the accumulation of amyloid plaques and neurofibrillary tangles in the brain tissue that interrupts structure as well as the connections between the neurons. And now looking at these multiple pathways, there are root drivers to cognitive decline, whether it's normal aging or some of these neurodegenerative processes that I mentioned. And these are lifestyle factors. Our daily habits, again, are so critical to shaping our cognitive abilities in the future. So the lifestyle factors that we know are critical are physical activity, moving our bodies, can be aerobic and strength training activities. Nutrition. So again, focusing on the whole foods and plant predominant diets. And this is across multiple health professional society recommendations. Restorative sleep, trying to aim for the 7 to 8 hours of sleep at night. Keeping your stress in check, because we know that excessive stress response is not good for our body or for our brains. And then social and cognitive engagement. We want to continue with intellectual challenges and stimulation through puzzles, reading, learning a new recipe or a new language. And I don't want to forget about avoidance of risky substances. So staying away from smoking, of course, and excessive alcohol use is really critical. And just in general, whatever is going to be good for your body and your heart function is going to be good for your brain health too. So this is nothing new, but just a good reminder that everyday life habits are so important. And what's amazing too is that our research and the science is really starting to come together now. Just recently published was the U.S. Pointer study. And was a multi-center, I think it was a 2-year study looking at older adults who are at risk for cognitive decline. So I'm going to say that these were actually individuals who were at higher risk for having changes with their cognition. They underwent lifestyle interventions through changes with their diet, fitness, keeping socially and mentally engaged. They also managed their kind of baseline health factors like cholesterol, blood pressure, glucose. And what they found out was that doing these lifestyle measures actually protected their memory and their thinking. So this was really an amazing study. And hopefully we'll see more of that in the literature as far as longer term outcomes. And so biologically, this is just really broad strokes in general. We're not going to get down into the nitty gritty science, but making these lifestyle changes can lead to inflammation reduction. And it can also stimulate growth factors, brain-derived growth factors specifically, that can aid in brain cell renewal and adaptation. This is a concept or process called neuroplasticity. So, which I think is amazing. So even though that process does slow down as we get older, it's still present. So this is terrific news, everybody. So right now, this is the perfect time. No matter how old you are, your 30s and your 70s is really a great time to take advantage of lifestyle habits and to make these active changes, like moving more, eating better, quitting the smoking, staying social. And, when we're starting these new changes and new habits, I just caution everyone, take it slow, take it easy. Always check in with your physician about getting clearance on starting a brand new nutrition plan or exercise routine. I'm a big believer in registered dietitians. I think they're wonderful sources of information to really understand what is best for your body. And so really, all of this is just so exciting right now because the science is really coming together. Kind of going back to blue zones, those are really observational information. And now, the American College of Lifestyle Medicine and all this lifestyle research is really bringing it, um, really providing us a scientific basis and evidence to say that lifestyle is one of the most powerful tools we have to maintain our cognition and keep sharp as we get older.
Thank you so much for that. As I bring us to a close, our hope here was to recognize this mind, body, money connection and how we might approach longevity by bringing together our finances, including health and caregiving into those planning efforts. Thank you so much to our panelists for being with us today and leading our discussion. And thank you all for joining. A replay of today's discussion will be shared after, and it will also be updated on our website. A link to that website can be found right on your On24 console. Please feel free to watch and share or to download our New York Life Golden Living position paper to learn more. Take good care and stay well.